So, good evening, everyone. I am Vera Mariz from the Azulejo Research Network, which is part of ARTIS, the Institute of Art History of the University of Lisbon. So, on behalf of my research group and our partner, the National Azulejo Museum, I would like to welcome you all. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Hans Brandhorst, with whom the Azulejo Research Network has already worked in the past, namely in the translation of Iconclass to Portuguese. Hans, where are you?
I'm over here.
Hi. Thank you so much for having accepted our invitation. Hans Brandhorst studied art history and history at the Leiden University. Since the 1980s, his research interest has been in the theory and practice of computer-assisted subject access to images. In this framework, Hans has been applying the Iconclass system to a variety of sources, and for many years now he has been acting as Iconclass editor. With his colleague and technical partner Etienne Posthumous, Hans runs the website of the Iconclass system, but also the Arkyves database that brings together collections indexed with Iconclass, as well as the first digital edition of Kirchenbaum's Lexicon of Christian Iconography. In the session, Hans will show how the lexicon contents relate to the digital reproductions of works available online and also with the concepts used in Iconclass. Before passing on to Hans, let me just remember that from now on you can place your questions and remarks in the chat, which will be addressed later during the Q&A section. But of course, you have any question and you wish to put that question during Hans' presentation, Hans is welcome to receive it. So, without further ado, Hans, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for your introduction, and I was just smiling at your background, which shows a slightly earlier version of the site. Which, when I go over to sharing my screen, you'll see we have a slightly different version. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, perfect.
So you'll see we have moved up our window on Adam and Eve slightly. What I'm proposing to do is, like you announced it, it's quite informal. The lexicon, as you can see here, if it's too small, what you see, it depends on how large your screen is. So if you can't read it, let me know. There's a help button here, and I've clicked on that earlier, which brings you to this help file, which is a quite extensive file at the moment, because the lexicon, the digital edition of the lexicon is actually quite unusual. It has a number of new features, so I would really, if you start using it, it can be very helpful to have a look at the help file itself. Usually the help file is ignored by most people. It's something they only look at once they decide, after a few weeks of trying, that they can't find something. Then they look in the help file. In this case, I really would like to urge you to have a look at it first. If you've listened to what I have to say, of course, then you don't have to do that again. I'm going to click through the help file, and then next to the help file, do just the live exercises that are described in the help file. The first screen is what you would expect. It has a short explanation. Let me show you the original set of books. There are a few editions, but they're all photomechanical reproductions. So the original edition, as it was published in 1972, 74, has for all those years been the edition of Kirschbaum. It has not changed. And it's still, let me disappoint you immediately, it still has not changed. We are using the same set of books with the same content, basically. But what we have tried to do is to make it much easier to use the set of books. So let me go to the first screen of the help file and then do the same thing. This is the live version of what you are looking at here. It says we have two boxes to enter a query, a full text and a lemmata filter box. As you can see, I'm bound to confuse myself thinking I'm looking at the live version and then looking at the help file because they're so similar. But as you can see, this is what we call the lemma, Aaron, and this is a full text in German of the lexicon text. This is what the explanations are, where you find them. And as you can see, they're arranged alphabetically, which is logical for a lexicon. The original lexicon was arranged in two sets. The Allgemeine Ikonographie and then Ikonographie der Heiligen. It's a German set. So you have the general iconography and the iconography of saints. I already had Aaron as a query set. So what you see here are the lemmata in the first part of the system that have a reference to the word Aaron. And if you scroll down, you can see there are also entries in the second half of the lexicon, the original second half of the iconography of saints, where the word Aaron also occurs. So let me just repeat the example from the help file. And because usually this kind of meetings takes place around dinner time, Abendmahl seemed, I've already had my dinner because in the Netherlands we are a little ahead of you. So Abendmahl is the way to search. As you can see, there's a number of entries that appears. And again here, a few of those Abendmahl, because of course it's a general word. It's not just Last Supper, but it's also supper in general, eating and dinner. If you want to filter that, you can see, if you just start typing, you can see immediately the lemmata list will become much smaller. So if you're interested in Abendmahl or Last Supper in the context of the Eucharist, you just have to type EU and then it will filter for Eucharistie in German. So this is also what I explained here in the help file. Full text searching with Abendmahl, that's the first thing we did. Then if you do that and you click on Abendmahl, you'll see a small change here. And what you saw happen was it jumped to the page. In this case, the lexicon is not paginated, but the numbering is for columns. So it is volume. Abendmahl is located in the first volume, and it starts on column number 10. As you can see here, it says 10. You can zoom in this way, and then you can zoom out. And as you can see, it's quite a long lemma. It stretches over a number of pages. So the navigation through the lexicon, that's quite important, that you know how to deal with the navigation. You can zoom in. I'm using a scroll mouse. You don't really, if you don't have a scroll mouse, you can still, and I'll show it later, zoom in and zoom out and move around with the arrow keys on a simple keyboard. Let me see. Well, there are some arrows here. Abendmahl points to that. So those are the aspects that are brought together in this screen. It says Abendmahl. Here it says Abendmahl. And as you can see, let me zoom in a little bit. You can see there is a subdivision in the lemma Abendmahl, the enunciation of the announcement of the how do you say that, treason, Judas, the table, Christ, St. John, those sub-lemmata, as you could call them, are also indicated. And as you can see here, it says the apostles, Christ. So a number of those subdivisions of a lemma have also been indexed by us here, which is relevant, as you can see, as you will see later on, because they are also they're all tagged with Iconclass notations. So that's useful if, for instance, your German is not as good as you would like it to be, but also to do different queries through the lexicon than just by the alphabetical index of the lemmata. We'll see that later on. Like I explained already, you can filter with lemma, just the abbreviations or the first letters, and you can combine that with full text searching. Let me explain a little bit about the full text searching. Some of these things I will mention twice or three times during the explanation, because they are relevant at more points of my explanation. What you need to know is I already showed the book. It's just pages like that. You all know books. What we got about 2 or 3 years ago when we started the project was actually just a scan of those 8 volumes. So there was no electronic text. This is a book printed in 1972-73. So it's just photocopied pages. So to create legible, machine-readable text, it is OCR'd. So optical character recognition was applied to this, but let me show a little bit of the typical way this lexicon, like a really German lexicon, it's very thorough, but it's full of abbreviations. For instance, here it says Buchtal, and then these are abbreviations. Here it says ivory, Elfenbein, Ende 10. Jahrhundert, the end of the 10th century, etc. Those are just small examples. Of course, Mark 14, 18. There are many different systems of abbreviations at work in this lexicon. There's a separate section in one of the volumes that explains quite extensively what the abbreviations are about. But you can imagine if you apply OCR technology on a text like that, you run into quite some problems. So the OCR is not perfect. But we did spend quite a number of months correcting it manually. So it is much better than the initial set of the text that you could use. Back to the help file. I said a little bit about, this is showing how you can do the turning of the pages and the sliding. I'll just show it again here. You can zoom out. There's a little button here. It's the home button. If you click on that, you'll get a strange sort of layout of the complete set of books. What you're looking at here is about 3,000 pages. So you can zoom in and out of the whole set of books like this. You can just scroll until you can read it like this. So the complete set of books is, and that's quite peculiar and doesn't have a lot of precedence. It's embedded in a single bitmap. And that's quite a large one. And still we wanted to keep the original layout of the pages. The reason for that is twofold. We wanted to keep this just as a readable page. You can zoom in and then you can simply read the page. We think that's a nice way of reading. But because the lexicon is already so old, it's 40, 50 years that it has been used, and as most of you will know, there's an enormous amount of references in scholarly literature made to the lexicon. And those references normally will be a reference to a volume and a column number. So if you would turn, after you've OCR'd the whole text, and you would turn this into normal HTML pages, you would lose the target of all those references. So to make sure that all of those existing references still can be followed, we opted to preserve the original layout of the book. Also because we didn't have the means to completely update the complete content. That would have taken many more years. One of the reasons Brill has taken over this lexicon, which was originally from a German publisher, Herder, was that Herder had tried to do a new edition, and they came. I wouldn't call that old-fashioned, but they had the ambition to do a really completely new edition, and it couldn't be financed. It's just too ambitious. There's not enough market for a book-length, 10-volume, very, very expensive new set. So this is a sort of a compromise. We opted to keep the original layout, but try to add functionality. That's an important. Well, this is an added functionality, of course. Let me see how the time goes. I just shown that you can zoom out to see the complete context. What you can see if you zoom out, or if you click on a certain page like this, you double click on the page, it takes a little while, and then you can see I hope you can see a very thin gray line around it. And that means that this is the page that has focus. That's a computer term. That's the page which has focus. And also, if I double click on eagle, which is hedgehog, you can see the lemma is changed here. It also says eagle. This is the lemma, and if you double click here, it synchronizes with the page, and that has some consequences, which I'll show in a second. This is what I already shown. There's a sort of a new speak. We call this a metabooknik. You can't forget about that, but maybe you will come across the term. It's an invented term by a colleague from us in Amsterdam. This is an overview of what. There is a link in the help file to the Metabotnik page, which is a separate page that explains a little bit about that technology and the ambition of the Metabotnik website. I've already shown the home button as well. Now, navigation has also little, as you can see, eagle has the focus, and then if you click on this, you can just go to the next IHS, that's the monogram, Icaros. So if you click on this one, you can jump from this lemma to the next one. You can also see there are cross-references, like this one. Imago Pietatis has a cross-reference to Schmerzensmann in German. We used optical character recognition technology, or computer vision technology, to identify all of those arrows. In those 8 volumes, there are about 30,000 of those little arrows. So what we've done now, if you double click on the word, you can also see again a very thin gray line that around the start of the word Schmerzensmann. Now, you can imagine that if you use technology to identify those little arrows, you'll miss a few. That's inevitable. If you try to identify 30,000 of those in a PDF file or in image in JPEGs, you will miss a few. And that's why we did the following. If you double click on something like that, we transport the word we think is intended to the search box, and we also immediately add the first letter from the Lemmata list, and then you can see, yeah, this is what I mean, Schmerzensmann. You click on that, and then you jump to Schmerzensmann. That's the way you can cross-reference and jump through the book. And then Schmerzensmann is here. And again, the little gray line will show you that this is the one that now has focus. Let me get a little ahead of myself and go to some of the consequences of that. This might be a good time. If you are landed on a certain page, in this case, volume 4, column 87, 88, Schmerzensmann, and there are images, there's a button here that will lead you, click on that, and it will try to bring you to the Metabotnik at the homepage. I'll explain that later on again. As you can see, what we've done is, and what we are still in the process of doing, is the illustrations, the original illustrations from the lexicon are 2,500 black and white, old-fashioned, moderately, of moderate quality, black and white prints in the book. Now, of course, now we have an enormous flood of color digital images on the web. The original, let me return to the book itself and zoom out. If I zoom out, you can see all those little gray and black specks. Those are the illustrations in the book. Now, what we've done is we kept them, of course, on the page they are in, and then we isolated all of those images and tried to find modern scans of those, bring them together on the home page. This is the home page. If you scroll down the home page and you do oops, sorry, should do this. Then you can see we've brought together now, because this is an ongoing process that will take maybe 1 or 2 years before it's completed. Because as I explained, the book itself contains something like 2,500 original black and white images. But if you look at the text on the pages, let me close this one, go back to the text on the pages. Of course, because it's a lexicon about iconography, it'll mention and make reference to endless numbers of works of art. If you look here it says Deccan Fresco von Giorgio Appiani, Fiorenzo di Lorenzo, Walter's Art Gallery, etc., etc. So it makes mention of, my estimate is at least 40 to 50,000 works of art. And I don't know whether you've tried to find 40,000 specific images online in museums and libraries. I can assure you it'll take a little while before you've found them all. So far, if you look at this Metabotnik, this contains about 5,000. So as where we stand now, we have almost duplicated the complete set of images. The way that works is what I showed you. If you go to, let me go back to Abraham, for instance. And then jump back to the page. You remember probably what you have to do if you want to shift from one volume to the next volume, or try to follow those references in a book. You need all kinds of little papers that you stick in the book to remember where you were, etc., etc. So this is as a procedure, this is easier. My own personal test is, what am I using if I do research? Am I still using this, or have I switched to the electronic version? And of course, I'm in the advantage that I'm making this, so it's not really fair, but I find myself using the electronic version all the time. Now, if we are at Abraham and we click on images, then it'll jump to the vicinity of Abraham, because that's an important element. The book itself only contains a few images, one page like this, with images of Abraham. But the story of Abraham in the lemma has dozens of references to works of art. That's why the link cannot be one-to-one. You have to look around for yourself. You end up in the metabooknik around Abraham, and then you have to, work your way through. If you pay attention here, you can see that every image you click on has a small amount of metadata. So you click on this one, then you can see, it's a Rembrandt at St. Petersburg, or this is in Siena, Beccafumi mosaic, Jacopo della Quercia, Sacrifice of Isaac. And what you can see here, the lemma that is used, or where we find a reference to this work of art, is mentioned here, and the volume and column number as well. And they have been made clickable. So you can use the this large set of images just to browse around, and if something is interesting for you, you can click on that, zoom in this case Michelangelo, and then you can click on this and you'll be transported to column 62 eventually, as you can see. This is the 62nd, this is column 62, and there you will see a reference. If you look carefully, at some point here you can see the Sixtinische Kapelle. So you can imagine it's quite a lot of work, and we decided to focus on enriching the lexicon in this way, rather than spending a lot of time in correcting, supplementing, finding new information for the lexicon. And that's why my contribution is also called Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, because that's what we are doing actually. Those giants are the people like Lucchesi Palli or Schade, or the ones that have signed for the information that's already in the lexicon. And we are standing on their shoulders and trying to find all the things that they have already mentioned and made a reference to, because I think that's what we think it's important to bring this material together and illustrate it. So let me continue a little with this, see what I've already explained. Some of the things I've already shown, the image, and this is the way you have to look around. This was one of the original images that was in the lexicon, and you can see in this case, there's a little German metadata reference. So there you can see this is one of the original illustrations. If it's in English, then it's a new one. It's one of the images that we've added on the basis of the reference, and then we create a small piece of metadata, just a title, just a caption, but also Iconclass notations. those are added here as well. At this point in time, we don't do anything with the Iconclass notations for the images. It's a slightly confusing thing, but they are waiting to be processed later on. Continue there. Those are the things I've mentioned. Navigating the lexicon, if you know your reference, if you have a specific reference and you want to go, let's say you want to go to volume 5, column 1, 2, 3, you can just jump there, which is useful if you have a reference in an article, or it's something that many of the IT people, you know, they would ask very often. If I would make this as a requirement, they would ask me, who the hell knows on which page they can find something about Amon? Well, my answer is always, well, they've read an article that makes a reference to this particular page. That's why this is a useful addition, I think. So that's, Regesta Imperio is a website where you have a complete list of the lemmata, not the full text, but a list of the lemmata. So that's why it's useful to have this kind of references. You can make your own bookmarks. Those are, that's logical. It's like the, you know, the little pieces of paper that you put in the books, but you can bookmark, and it'll remember the page where you made the bookmark. And you can, you know, do a little piece of text. You can write a little note to yourself, and then you know why you have made a bookmark for this particular page. I've already shown you these cross-references, and they're explained here, how they work. That's explained in the help file again. Let me go to Abel und Kain. And go to this German text. Like I said, it's originally in German, and not everyone, you know, has easy German. I'm Dutch, so for me it's easier. But many of the people, of course, let me say around the Mediterranean, Italy, and then Portugal, so German is not your second language in school. So the OCR text is offered in a number of ways. This is the German machine readable text. This is what is underlying the full text search. But it's also, and that's a Google trick, what we've added is a Google automated, well, I always hesitate calling this a translation because it's not a translation. And especially because it's complicated German full of abbreviations. So it is a language support system. And we've done it so far in English, French, Italian. We didn't do it yet in Portuguese, but because this is automated, and if there is enough, the people at Brill would say, well, if there's a market for the Portuguese, we'll add the Portuguese as well. We'll see about that. And because we are Dutch, there's a Dutch translation or a Dutch version here. But it's helpful, and it helps you, and it assumes you know a little German. And if you know a little German and a little French, you'll understand the text. That's the whole idea. Let me see. I'll take it from the live site here. There's the Iconclass button. That's a secondary way of going through the lexicon. As you can see, Abel und Kain, that has been manually linked to the Iconclass concept for the story of Cain and Abel. If I click on that one, it'll change it'll add this Iconclass notation as as a search option. So if I click here, I'll get the story of Cain and Abel as an Iconclass notation, and it'll bring up the lemmata to which that Iconclass notation has been assigned. But because it's Iconclass, I can also, do a broader search on the basis of that. I can switch from 71A8, the story of Cain and Abel. I can say I want to see all of the lemmata entries that have to do with Genesis from the creation to the expulsion. And I can switch to that one. And then I can put the more specific one on hold, which is important, because if you understand hierarchy, you'll understand that there is no point in trying to find 71A and 71A8 at the same time, because this is the more specific one. But if I query now, you can see immediately the list is much longer. And this is a way of searching through a German alphabetically arranged lexicon that is impossible in any other way. Because now it's possible to find scenes from Genesis like Paradies or Mensch or Lebensbaum, the tree of life. So this is different, it's like coming at an angle to the lexicon, a different angle. And because of the use of Iconclass, we can also link it to Arkyves. The Arkyves database is a Brill product that is based on iconography and the use of Iconclass. So if I click on this button, what it does, you can see there's errors in the Arkyves database. It'll give you a selection, a first sample of scenes of, in this case, this query, Genesis from the creation to the expulsion. And you can also immediately, if you have a subscription to Arkyves, at this point in time, it's subscription-based. And, well, I'm not telling a secret if I stress the fact that many people would really like Arkyves to be open access. And it's something that we are attempting to, get in the future. Which would mean that we would need to find some sponsoring for a gold open access version of Arkyves, and then it can be made completely open. You click on Open Arkyves, and then it'll do the same query that you already did in the lexicon. It'll repeat that for the Arkyves content. So it'll find you the story of Cain and Abel in the Arkyves dataset. This can be linked to other data sets as well. We could, of course, do it with Arkyves quite easily because it's also from the same source. It's also a Brill product, but it doesn't really have to be. Let me remove this and go back to the first one, the Abendmahl. Because there's another link, that's the reason I chose the Abendmahl. There's a little button here that says IMA, and that's the Index of Medieval Art at Princeton. For about, I think, in all there are about 8,000 lemmata in the complete set of the lexicon. And I think about 1,000 to maybe 1,200 of those have been manually linked. And it's especially for the set of works of the second half of the lexicon, the Saints, has been linked to the Index of Medieval Art. So for Christ and the Last Supper, the Abendmahl, if you then click on this button from the Index of Medieval Art, if you are subscribing, you'll see the metadata, which you always see, but you will also see the images. And you have to be a subscriber to the Index of Medieval Art to see the illustrations. It's basically, it's reversed from our situation, where all the images are in open access, but the metadata are in the lexicon. And the reason for that is also, it's a copyright thing. because many of those libraries from where for instance, these are from libraries that have a Creative Commons license that allow you to reuse those images, those pages, on your own webpage, as long as you do it in open access. So you're not allowed to make commercial use of library and museum material in some instances. Other instances, like the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, they don't care. You can do whatever you want with their material. But other libraries, the British Library, for instance, has a restriction on commercial reuse. But by offering all of the images on the homepage, which is open, that's not a commercial reuse. So I think it's a funny contradiction that we are offering the images and no restrictions there. And the Index of Medieval Art has different, of course, has different licensing issues, and they restrict the access to the images. But they do offer all of the metadata, the descriptions, they're open to the public. And I know, because I know Pamela Patton quite well, that their ambition also would be to have this completely open access, but they have the same restrictions or the same problems that we have. It's a lot of work to make this, so someone has to finance that. We've done the OCR and the language and the Iconclass issues, and I've shown this. We're getting there quite quickly. Shown this live. Well, this is just another way of, let me illustrate that. Abendmahl is also meal, and there's the pipe symbol for the Boolean OR. So you can search in English because of the Iconclass notation and the Iconclass layer that has been added to this German lexicon. You can search in English, meal or supper. And at some point, we'll also have the Portuguese translation of Iconclass behind this, so you can search this in Portuguese as well. But if you do this, meal or supper, you'll have a number of, as you can see here, Maal, Gastmaal, Salbung Jesu, by Gastmaal, etc. So you have an added option to search in English through the lexicon. And I think I'm almost. This is a quite complicated thing. I would advise you just to read this in the help file, which is available. You can read the help file anyway. It's a quite subtle reference to Bernard of Clairvaux. This image, and it has to do with white dogs. I think it's better if you read that. It'll be quite a while if I have to explain that now. The Index of Medieval Art link I have explained. I've shown this one. Because of the Iconclass usage, I just mentioned, and that's the last thing I want to say here. Other databases that use Iconclass are, on principle, quite easily linkable to archives. And the Bild Index, maybe it's not, you're not too familiar with that because it's also in German, but it's a huge and very, very well done database on and has an enormous amount of information, especially iconography. And here you can see Saint Bernard. This is the reason I put this up. If you're interested in Bernard of Clairvaux, you'll have more than 600 well documented instances of that saint's information. Citing and hyperlinking is the last thing I'm going to use. Cite this, well, that's pretty standard nowadays. You can copy the link, the DOI link. Every lemma, or every, I think it's every lemma, has a DOI. So you can make a reference with the help of a DOI to the lexicon. I think that's basically, this is the last screen. So I covered all the aspects, I think, of the lexicon. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Hans, for your very enlightening and I may say time-saving presentation.
I hope.
Yeah, definitely very useful. So now we have time for a little Q&A. Feel free to type your questions in the chat, or if you prefer to speak, raise your hand, but please keep it brief. So we have a comment from Lucia praising your work. Everyone is still digesting all these contents. While they do so, I may pose like I would say a very broad question, but how did the goals, the aims of the project evolve over time? Because the technology, like you said, it's always evolving. So how did the project goals evolve?
Well, because all of the programming is done in-house. It's the programming, the software is written by Etienne Posthumus. So the way we approach it is really working together. Me as the well, I wouldn't say expert, but the one who knows a little about iconography, and Etienne as a programmer. So there is no there was no model. We haven't seen. I don't know whether you've seen anything like this. We haven't. So we had to, start doing it and think what would be useful. And my input is, well, I'm like a child in the candy shop, because I have been there doing that for the past 20, 30 years, working very closely together with programmers. I think that's the best. Well, for me, that's the best way to do it, is collaboration. And there are lots of things that you don't. There's with automation and software projects. The standard procedure is that you draw up a list of functional requirements, and that's usually bogus, because if you do something new and you need to be innovative, you can only do very summarily list of what you want, and then you start doing it, and you change all the time. And in this case, we had quite some input over the past months, half years, maybe a year, because it took quite a long time so far. And other people, had comments and suggestions, and we still are open to new suggestions, because I don't think this is something that is finished. Like I said, it'll take many years before all the images have been found. So we really hope that this is an ongoing thing. I see a question.
Yeah, from Fernando.
The OCR. Yeah, it's IIIF is for the image. That's used. That's correct. I can show. Then I have to get back to sharing my screen.
Yeah. No problem.
The image information. Let me go back to the Metabotnik at the start, and just start at the beginning. The first one says Alpha and Omega next to the horizontal arms of the cross in Ravenna, San Apollinare. The next one also says Ravenna and then Santa Sabina. And this is an error, which is very funny, but very to the point here. It says Aaron. This is the lemma. For every lemma, we start with a little lemma label in the Metabotnik. That's automated. And let me show you in a second where this comes from. Here you can see Aaron. Here you can see it's written Aaron. From the Ashburnham Pentateuch. This is from the Vivian Bible in Paris. But this says Synagogue of Dura Europos, which is nonsense. Obviously, this is a woodcut, and this is Delilah and Samson. It's nothing to do with Aaron. And the reason for that is I made a mistake there. And let me show you how we, and that's in response to the question. This is the spreadsheet, the Google spreadsheet we are using to populate, if you want to call it that, this metabotnik. So here's the identifier, is the identifier of the lemma. This is the text of the lemma. Here it says Aaron. And then it says, where is it? It's the first volume and the column number. And then there's a sequence identifier, which gives me the opportunity to make sure that an image is in a correct place in the metabotnik. But when I screw up, that's going to be in the metabotnik. It's an error. I just used this word, this JPEG name, Aaron, for or I think it's this one, yeah, for a completely different woodcut. I made this mistake. I corrected it now, but the metabotnik still has to be made, because this is the actual Dura Europos Aaron. This is the one that should have been in the metabotnik. When I was preparing this, I noticed the error. So yeah, well, but this is the way it works. I'm trying to get back to my... Can you still see the screen?
Yeah.
Did I lose it? Oh, right. So here you can see there's a little text reference to where in the... let me see if I... Yeah. And then there's Synagogue of Dura Europos. That's the English metadata, the caption. And here's our Iconclass notations that, like I said, we are not using at the moment, but we will use those in the future. So there'll be a much richer iconographic information linked to the big metabotnik at the start than we do now. So these are not really automatically linked to the OCR text. They are manually done. And let me stop the sharing. So I'm afraid no, it's not done by software, just by software. Although the Google spreadsheet is transformed into this metabotnik for the homepage, and there's a standardized script that runs whenever we want. And we are planning to, do this every month or every 2 months to update the set of images at the start. Yeah, patience is what you need. That's true.
We have a question from Anna concerning the Portuguese version of Iconclass. There were specific needs or challenges in adapting the translation.
The Portuguese translation of Iconclass. Well, there are some changes that we're going through now because as you will know, the Iconclass website, the browser, has been there for too long. It's really necessary now to update it, and HN has started doing that in 2 ways. First of all, he's placed all of the underlying text data in GitHub, so it's open now. Everyone who wants to can have access, and I'll if you want to, I can make some references so everyone can see that. And he is also making a new browser which will have the Iconclass Portuguese version right there from the start with the other ones, because that was it was quite some work to add the Portuguese translation to the old browser. So we have been, and I know he doesn't like me to, but he has been, sort of making excuses that he didn't do that. But it was a lot of work to add the Portuguese translation to a browser, which actually is old software. So, he was going back and forth. Shall I do it now, or shall I really start making a new browser? And we've decided for the latter. So there's a new browser underway, and I'll send you a reference to the URL, because you can have a look at the browser itself and the state it's now in. But there's also a Google Doc file where everyone, which is open, and if you have a requirement for the Iconclass browser, you can add that to also a wish list in this Google Doc. So it's not just me making wishes, but everyone can make a wish and add that. Of course, I can't promise that it'll be done very quickly, because all of this is basically voluntary work. But this is what we really like, and I know that the input of others is very creating enthusiasm with us to do something, because that's what you really want to do.
We have another question, Patricia.
Mm-hmm.
What are the main challenges for the articulation or combination of the different sources or platforms in this project?
Well, the challenges. Well, there are some challenges, and it's the main challenge is just time, the human effort you have to put into it. One of the things that I didn't show, but what we have already done, most of the lemmata, especially the ones in the first 4 volumes, because they will make a reference to a biblical source, Adam and Eva. The lemma text will start with quellen, sources. So it will tell you the story of Adam and Eva is told in Genesis 1, etc. And of course, what would be helpful it would be if you have the Bible text immediately available there. And what we've prepared is in a spreadsheet similar to this one, is links to the King James Version, just one version of the Bible to start with. And that would make it possible in the future to add another button in the interface that will say, show me the Bible text, without you needing, of course, you can pick the Bible from the shelf, but that's why we do these things. It's helpful if you have a biblical text immediately available. Another type of source that we would really like to add, many of the lemmata dealing with scenes from the iconography of the Bible will make a reference to works of typology, like the Bible Moralisée or the Speculum Humanae Salvationis. And there are literally hundreds and hundreds of references to those sources. And I think it would be very useful if we could isolate those and again make them also available as separate pieces of information. There are some websites that already do similar things. I don't know if you're familiar with the Warburg. Of course, you know the Warburg Institute in London, but the the iconographic database they also have available has an enormous amount of information about typology. So I've studied those, and we're thinking of combining that type of information with what's already in the lexicon. But again, the lexicon needs to be sold first, and the people at Brill's need to think that it's worthwhile. At the moment, it's still 1 week more of beta testing, and by the 1st of July, I think Brill will be starting to sell it. So, but that's something I have nothing to do with. I'm just, working on this, and that's the marketing department of Brill who needs to do that. So.
Let's finish for today. Thank you, Hans, once again for this amazing evening. On a final note, I would just like to remind you, actually, that the AzLab lecture will be interrupted during the summer, but we'll come back in October for a new season, starting with 3 sessions dedicated to museum collections, namely the Rijksmuseum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the Dutch Town Museum in Otterlo. So until now, make sure you follow us on social media, on our blog, to know more about the next year's calendar and all the news that we are working on. So thank you again, Hans, and thank you all for joining us today. See you soon.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Hans, bye.